Hi, I'm Jeff Hayes of Jeff Hayes Films. In my episode of The Business Growth Architect, I'm going to talk about the entrepreneurial brain and the fact that you may think your brain is broken. To find out the answer to that question, you're going to need to listen to the show. Here it is.
Welcome to the Business Growth Architect Show. I am Beate Gillette. I am the host. I want to welcome you to our globally top 10% ranked podcast, where you will hear from industry experts about the strategies that are working right now to unlock hidden opportunities in any market so that you can grow your authority and scale your impact. And now let's get started with the show. Hello and welcome back. This is your host, Beate Gillette, the Growth Architect. Today, I'm talking to Jeff Hayes, and I am actually really excited about the conversation because we're going to talk to a true creative. So a lot of our audience, Jeff, are creatives, and they always worry about, what do I do with the art? You know, parents told them that there is no money to be made in creativity. And here you are, a filmmaker, a writer, author. I mean, you are all of it. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
So for somebody who's never heard about you, will you give us an overview and introduction of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I am a PhD in, okay, I'm lying about that. I'm a high school dropout.
Go ahead.
I was with a guy last week who in 2006 won the Nobel Prize. And I mentioned him when I got my Nobel Prize, and I'm like, okay, I can't back that up. There was no Nobel Prize. I have been unique since the day I was born. I'm a born entrepreneur. I'm a creative. I used to want to think I was an artist, but I'm not an artist. I'm a patron, and I get great work out of directors, great work out of producers, and I realized there would be no Michelangelo without the Medicis. And so patrons have their place in this creative world. Also, I love true artists and true creatives. And so my creativity is expressed in collaboration with it almost like, Steve Jobs is given credit for a lot of the Apple design. And in reality, it was Ive who created all the designs, but he did it because Steve Jobs was working with him and getting great work from him, and that's where those designs came from. So I've been shortlisted for an Academy Award in documentary film in 2006. I'm a prolific producer, probably produce 10 films a year. I have a film that is in theaters right now that I did with Amy Redford last year, a scripted film. I have a Holocaust film that's at Paramount right now, all the way down to things that I produce and release myself. When I get together with, at one time at Sundance, there were 6 of us that went to dinner together, and everybody at the table, except for me, had won an Academy Award or been nominated recently for an Academy Award. And the question was not, how did we win an Academy Award? The question was, holy cow, Jeff, how do you do what we do, but you make money and we're starving to death?
But they win the awards, right?
Right. So that's really my contribution is I've figured out by being a business person and an internet marketer how to find a place for my creativity to live profitably.
And this is one of the things that I want to talk to you about. So do you mind sharing with us some of the films that you've done? Because I think people actually know your work.
Yeah. So I tend to veer into controversial topics. Last year I did a film, The Real Anthony Fauci, that was the documentary of Bobby Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci. That book sold 1 million copies without having one major media review. It has 2,700 citations. He makes some very bold claims that no one has sued him over because it's factual. And so I read the book and I realized this is something that needs it. It's 500 pages and fairly dense, and I wanted to make it in a more digestible format. But I also, did a series called Money Revealed to help people make money from it. I do health topics. In 2006, I did the documentary of the 9/11 Commission report on native soil with Kevin Costner and Hilary Swank, and sold that to Lionsgate for distribution. And also, the previous year, did a response to Michael Moore's movie, Fahrenheit 9/11. I did Fahrenhype 9/11. That was a response to his movie. And that was really, for me, the money all came from Democrats. It was a marketing exercise that I filmed it in 29 days and sold it to Patrick Byrne at Overstock.com the day after I finished it. And Patrick, the day I finished it, made sure that I walked out the door a millionaire that day, which is a great story that I won't tell, because not only can I not tell somebody how to recreate it, I can't recreate it. So it's an interesting and useless story because I can't do it again. But anyway, a very varied bunch of topics that are all things that I'm fascinated by.
What I like about so me as a business strategist, a business growth architect, so I always look for what is a model that I haven't seen, where there is something that we can share with people. What I really like about you is, number one, you come across as fearless with the stuff that you do. So other people would never touch something like the Fauci documentary. Would you be able to share a little bit on how you manage that inner voice that a lot of creatives or people that are supporting creatives have to overcome, where people tell them, oh, don't touch that. That's going to backfire. That's too controversial. You're going to get canceled. You're going to get destroyed. How do you manage that pressure, Jeff?
Yeah, because the truth of it is not fearless and at the risk of being filled with myself. It's actually courageous, because whenever I start a project, I go through a pattern where I'm overly excited. I know it's going to be great. I don't care what's going to happen. This is going to be spectacular. And then I wake up the next morning and realize I'm going to get killed, I'm going to get canceled, and it's going to fail. And I visualize everything that's horrible about it. And then once I've peered over the abyss, then in another day, I come to a place where, okay, I've got to work really hard or it'll fail. I've got to do this right, but it does have the potential to be spectacular. So it is, I naturally go through a process where I overestimate its success, get myself all sold on it. Then I bounce off the guardrail and start making sparks off the other guardrail where it's a catastrophe. It's going to ruin my life and everybody's going to hate me. And then I land in the middle, and that's when I go to work.
I want to make sure that I point this out to all of our listeners. So Beehive, listen up to this. So the trick really here is, and Maria Shriver said this really nicely. She says, courage is when you feel fear and you do it anyway. And I like that way you articulated is that there has to be this excitement, this conviction that what you do is at the right time, at the right place. And then in mindset work, we know that the good cannot exist without the evil. The white cannot exist without the black. So you do have to, I think, in some sense, have both emotions of the success anticipation and the fear of failure, because within that is a lot of the creative process that makes you excel. You just have to learn how to channel that into the outcome. Is that a correct statement? Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's just, for me, I can't move forward until I look at the downside. I'm propelled by the upside. I move toward things, not away from things. But if there's this looming fear in the back of my mind that I haven't addressed, I'm ineffective. And so I will not horribilize it, but I will look at it and see what really could be the worst case scenario. And then once I accept that, then I can go, okay, now I can move forward without deceiving myself or telling myself it's going to be fine without ever having considered the downside.
It's almost like the adult you with consciousness then talks to the fearful child. Yes.
Thank you. That is a better description of it than I made, and I will now incorporate that into my thinking on it.
Yeah, I work with a high performance coach, and she always tells me that when there's an instant where you get just hammered, that the adult you has to go back to where the fear comes from, which is typically when we grew up or when stuff went wrong, and you and I were old enough, we have a bucket full of shit that went wrong at some point. So this is ever looming, terrible right there in our close proximity. And she just says, you just have to make sure that with your adult brain, you actually talk to the fear or the child that carries the fear. And so I thought it was the best example I've heard so far, that you actually make it part of your process and you say, I cannot move forward unless I've addressed that. So I thought that was really important to point this out.
Yeah, I do that with my therapist coach, and we do consciously have the adult me talk to the child me, but I've never done it in this exact process, even though I'm doing it. And so now I'm going to go ahead and identify the roles that I play, because that's something I do in my personal life and in my emotional life. Is my adult me going back to the 11-year-old me and consoling him and showing him everything is going to be okay. It all worked out fine, and thank you for getting me here. But I've never made it a part of my business process until now.
Well, see, but that's the part and we talked in the green room about the signature growth system. So that's the pattern that already comes up for me, for you, that if I were to now design a process around that, that's exactly the piece I would be pulling out. And I say, well, especially in the creative part, a lot of creatives don't understand what the process is. And I find it important to point it out again and again and again, that when I see this process in the unfolding, which is what you said. So the process number one, you go into the desire, you create the visual image of what it could be, and then you build that reverse engineer of how you need to take it back to start. And then there's a part of the process that's the what if part. And so that's part of your process, where it's like, okay, now we have to all sit down and talk about what could happen if the earth opens, if it hails, whatever disasters may happen. What's our scenario? And then we know that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And then that's a good forward plan for moving forward. And in the creative process, which you actually really well articulated, I think that's really the part about that most creatives are unaware of, that the bohemian conflict, where we go on stage and the bohemians are all broke and they're but having a great life and they're writing great songs and there's all the emotion in it. It is necessary to have greatness. Without that, there is no greatness. The greatness pushes through that. So if you didn't have that in the creative process, in my opinion, and my experience with working with creatives, there cannot be any greatness.
I love it. And as you describe it, when I talk about going into the depths and the worry and everything's going to collapse, it is the traumatized child. It is the 11-year-old Jeff who is coming up with these fearful ideas. And so anyway, I now have a little better label. Last week, I was at a small event party in Beverly Hills, and I looked across the room, and Stephen Stills from Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Stephen Stills was standing in the room. And I never bother celebrities. It's just like, I don't want to be that guy that interrupts their life. But this was Stephen Stills, and I looked at him for a minute, and I thought, tonight I'm that guy. And, I remember being 14 years old listening to his first solo album, Stephen Stills, and Eric Clapton played on it. And Eric Clapton was there that night last Monday. And Eric Clapton played on his solo album. Jimi Hendrix played on his solo album. So I walked over and said, hey, Stephen, I'm sorry to be that guy, but no way I'm walking in this room and we're not shaking hands. I can die a happy man now. He goes, well, don't do that. And I go, well, no time soon. But this was definitely a bucket list moment. But in my living room, I have collectible rock and roll photographs, and I have a picture on the wall. I have two that have Stephen Stills in them in my living room. And there's one where he's playing piano for Mick Jagger and on stage. And so I said, I've got this picture in my living room. He goes, oh, the Henry Diltz photo. And I go, yeah, these are Henry Diltz collectibles that I've decorated my house with. And I think of the inspiration that I get from true artists, from true creatives and here he stands 79 years old, having contributed massively to the anti-war movement in the late 60s, and to different social change and to just beauty. What better way to have lived someone's life to be 79 years old and looking back over a body of work that impacted for good so many people.
I love that. And we will talk about your impact with your upcoming film and book in just a moment, right after this message. Are you looking for the hidden opportunities for you in this market? Or are you simply wanting to figure out what is your unique differentiation factor that makes clients want to work with you and not your competitors? If this resonates, I want to invite you to go to uncoverysession.com and schedule your 15-minute complimentary uncovery session with one of our business growth advisors that will take you through what your number one business growth blocker is, what you can do to remove it, and what your very best next step should be. And now let's get back to the show. I really enjoyed your little groupie moment here.
Exactly. Well, but we don't even have to sugarcoat it.
We don't know. We really don't. Starstruck. But you were talking about creativity. So I want to talk to you about your upcoming book and the series that you created. So talk to me about the Entrepreneurial Brain. Where did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so 15 years or so ago, I read a book called The Hypomanic Edge by a psychologist named John Gardner, who talked about that America was populated with people who think differently, who if you can imagine, you're in Ireland, Italy, England. It's 1600s, 1700s. So there's infrastructure, there's housing, there's people. And all of a sudden, here's this opportunity to go to America where there's Indians, starvation, bad weather, opportunity, potential upside, risk beyond belief. And there's a group of people in these European companies who went, that makes sense. I'll get on a dangerous ship ride to, cross. And it made sense to them. And so we have an overpopulation of people who tend to not be put aside from because of risk, that are opportunity driven. And that's who founded this country. And we have unique characteristics. They're very near bipolar in that but someone with the entrepreneurial brain has the same 10 characteristics as somebody with bipolar. They believe their own BS. They talk too much. They tend to believe the rules do not apply to them. These are the people like Steve Jobs who okay, I can change the world. Elon Musk goes, send somebody to Mars. Yeah, that's something that I can do. And prior to him starting to send spaceships to space, you had to not only be a government, you had to be a big government like China, Russia, or the United States. No, forget small countries couldn't accomplish it, much less an individual. And somebody's brain is broken enough that they go, I think I can do that. And so this entrepreneurial brain, unlike bipolar, where they rocket from up to down, it tends to go up and just stay there. And it's a unique characteristic. And so the entrepreneurial brain is to try to help people understand if you have this brain, it's about 5% of the country, maybe as low as 3%. You are not broken. Your brain is a gift. It's also very similar to the criminal brain. Don't believe the rules apply to them. So without some guardrails and without some training, and hopefully with a mentor and with some coaching, you can take this brain and do something extraordinary. So the two big messages are you're not broken, especially children. When a teacher who has a most teachers' brains are very similar, as doctors' brains are very similar, and accountants' brains are very similar in their basic characteristics. To a teacher, an entrepreneurial brain looks broken. And they will tell the parents, we need to put your little Johnny on ADD medication so he can succeed in school. And it's difficult to explain to a teacher, well, little Jeff here, he learns by talking. Well, that makes him really, and by the way, he does better if he gets up and moves around. This brain does not fit the classroom that was designed to create a good factory worker. But if it's encouraged, and then if it's given opportunity for some guardrails and some mentorship and some coaching, we can do the most extraordinary things. So the book is partly about that brain and then specific skills. And then with the series that we created, it was really skills focused to let people know how to take this brain and harness it and create the success and the creative outlet to be able to have your impact in the world.
So, what interests me about this is I think that a lot of people can relate to that. I work with a lot of people that are following that a visionary thought leadership idea. The bigger, the bolder, the crazier the idea, the more I actually get excited about it. Because I think that there has to be a place here where we can land planes. I always say, Jeff, that in the educational system, it's built on one very simple model. Take existing information, remember existing information, regurgitate existing information, get an A. That's not innovation. That's not progress. That's status quo. So we are building in our educational system a whole bunch of status quo kids. And then there are people like you, people like me. I'm so glad I'm in the company with Elon Musk now and
Yes,
Steve Jobs, right? Yes, this has been the best interview so far. And to say that this constant report card that says talks too much, can't follow rules, that is actually a badge of honor that has prepped me to think out of the box. So talk to me a little bit. So the book has been published. And where can we get the book? And then we're going to talk a little bit about the film, but I want to make sure people know how to get this book, because I do think that for anyone who's ever wondered if there's something wrong with them, they probably should buy the book.
Yeah, this book was really an outgrowth. I have this entrepreneurial trait tends to be genetic, and some of your kids may have it and you'll recognize it in them, and some won't. But I have a grandson who my daughter, the teachers were arguing with her, wanted my grandson to be on ADD medication. And my daughter, her mother's instinct is like, no, we're not doing that. So I made a short film. They are premiering in the series. And the title of it is You Are Not Broken. It's definitely not for kids. It has Cameron Harold in it and Ned Hollowell, who's a Harvard MD psychiatrist, the top expert on ADD in the world. It has John Gardner, the psychologist who wrote The Hypomanic Edge, and it has a number of entrepreneurs in it. And the theme of it is you're not broken. And I've made that for my grandson because he needs to know that this gift is a gift, not a burden. And the book became an outgrowth of that same. It came from a meeting I was meeting at Genius Network in a room full of entrepreneurs, and somebody brought up the discussion, hey, my son is being recommended to be on ADD. What do you think? And all of a sudden you realize all these people there and all their kids, because it's fairly genetic, all their kids were facing this. And I wanted to make this contribution not only to our children that we're having these experts tell us, no, your kids their brains are broken and we've got to fix them with medication, but also for the parents, the people like you and I that have questions about ourselves. Like when I made the movie Fahrenhype 9/11, it was a response to Michael Moore's movie Fahrenhype 9/11. Michael Moore put out a press release that some top Republican operatives had made this film in response to him. And I cracked up top Republican operatives. The Republican Party didn't know my name. I'm in the midst of it. I had the thought, what in the heck gives me the right to make this film in response? That was the first documentary I'd ever made in my life. What gave me the right? And so I can sit back and observe the semi absurd things that I do and go, well, that's really a strange turn of events. And then the next year, I made the documentary of the 9/11 Commission report. That book sold 1 million copies, and it was a government issued book, 650-page government issued book, and it sold 1 million copies the first week. I discovered there was no copyright on the book because we, the American people, paid for it. We own it. And that meant that if I announced in the trades that I was making this documentary and got position first, I had just acquired the rights to 1 million selling book without having to pay anything. And so we made that announcement, and then we made that film. At the same time, I have to look at the absurdity of what in the heck gives me the right to commandeer 1 million selling government issued book and claim it as my own? And the answer is this wacky entrepreneurial brain.
It's so fascinating. So I take a couple of things out of this. I find it very calming, actually, to know that if you tell me that the entrepreneurial brain is different, because honestly, I kind of know this all along. When I had a conversation with one of my clients, and she has this love affair with a white picket fence, being married and a stay-at-home mom. And at some point in the conversation, I just said to her, who are you trying to convince? I said, that's not you. You couldn't do it even if it was in front of you. You'd internally die because that's not what we are made out of. We are driven by passion. We're driven by impact. We're driven by change. We do ridiculously stupid things, what other people say, until it works out, and then everybody calls us a genius. Now you wrote the book, and then you said, but that's not all. You did a series. And full disclosure, I am thrilled to announce that I am in the series. And I came to your studio, and we filmed, and I had such a blast doing it. So tell us about the series.
So we wanted to capture, I was just thinking as you're talking, one of the other people in it is a guy named Doug Brockman, who is a psychologist. And Doug Brockman divides us into farmers and hunters. We are hunters who live in a farmer's world. And farmers like things to be the same thing every day. Get up at 5 and check on the back 40, feed the chickens. Everything is the same. But we are hunters, and the world is designed for farmers. And so we need to band together. This is why I'm I spend $200,000 a year on masterminds. I have coaches. This is where we as entrepreneurs and owners and caretakers of these entrepreneurial brains, we have to be around a like crowd, and it's refreshing, and you can breathe, and your client can meet other women that don't have to pretend to be satisfied with the white picket fence and the dinner on table at 6 o'clock each night. And once you can breathe in the company of like-minded people, then it's okay to go back into the farmer's world and know that, okay, I'm a hunter. These are farmers. And I don't mean to say this in any way to denigrate anybody whose brain is different than mine. I want my unique characteristics to be recognized and utilized for the benefit of myself and the community and the world around me. And I believe that's what everybody wants. And I need teachers to be teachers. We need that role. And I need people to find where their flow is and follow their call. But some people feel the need to diminish your call or my call, and those people don't get an audience with my mind.
Have you always felt that there was a part about you where you're meant to be, let's just say, an accelerator for this?
from the time I could remember thinking. My mom died when I was 11, and she told some of her friends, I know Jennifer is going to be okay. That's my sister, who's 3 years older than I am. My sister is a Regents professor at a medical school, a PhD, has a $22 million grant right now from the NIH, was the principal investigator of the Women's Health Initiative. In terms in going down an academic path, she is at the pinnacle of her profession. She's the founding and editor in chief of a medical journal from Springer Nature on resilience and adversity trauma. She does, is the editor in chief founder of this journal. You could not go any higher than she has gone. And here I am, a high school dropout. And it's the comparison between the two of us could not be more stark. And my mom, before she passed, was quite concerned because my brain scared her because she did not share it.
Amazing. Well, on behalf of the entrepreneurial community, I really want to express my gratitude to you because, and having worked with many entrepreneurs and non-conforming people coming from photography, which is my only real degree, there is really something to be said about following the call and saying that because you have a double whammy. You don't have a path. You have to find your path while you're constantly worried about on whether you're on the right path, if you even have a right to be on any path. And then because you do things that haven't been done before, you perpetually have to give yourself permission to do so because everybody else calls you nuts. So for you to do what you do and to touch controversial subjects, which I also want to point out as necessary, because creativity cannot exist if I always confirm information that I already believe in. That's just ridiculous. There cannot be any creation that comes from that. Creation only comes from challenging a thought and then having the courage to step into that. So as we're closing this, Jeff, what would you say to somebody who now has listened to this interview all the way to the end and says, maybe I'm not broken?
Yeah, so I've got two things, and I'll try to do them very quickly, but this is a takeaway that anyone can use. When in King Arthur's court and the legends and myths of that period, when they had the round table and the knights were all sitting around the round table and then they went out on their quest, their first assignment was when they left the King Arthur's court, they could not take a trail that anyone had ever taken before. Here's a pathway that is not for me. It is through the bushes, through the brush, they were all forced to take a different trail. And I think this is an informing myth that this is what our assignment is. A friend of mine one time came up to me and said, Jeff, I have your 3 words. And I'm my 3 words, what are you talking about? And he says, yeah, your 3 words are discover, produce, and share. And I said, it was meaningless to me. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so in your work, you discover something or you create something, and then you produce it, which can mean develop, and then you share it. And he said, all the way down to, I had invited him to dinner the night previously. He says, you discovered a great chef, and then you hired this chef, and then you invited me to dinner and had your chef cook us dinner. So you share. So little things you do. So I literally thought about it for a month. And this is my natural pattern. I discover things, I develop them, and then I share them. And for me, the electrifying moment is when I get to share it. And so the entrepreneurial brain, why does that book exist? Because I discover, produce, and share. Why does this entrepreneurial brain series exist? Is because I discover. Oh, we discover you out there, and we're like, oh, we've got to have her. We bring you into the studio and record with you, and then I get to share it. That's the culmination. What I realized if I'm in concert with my 3 words, I am in flow. If I'm doing those 3 things, I stay in flow all the time. That is following the call of being adamant that and everybody has 3 different words. But if people will pay attention to what their core strategy is, how they appear in the world, how they give their gift, it won't be my 3 words, but they have a way they do anything and do everything. Once you have that, I become committed to that. And as long as I'm discovering, producing, and sharing, I stay happy, I stay in flow, and I stay doing what I'm supposed to.
And what a great way to finish the interview. Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure for you to be on the show, having you, talking to you, sharing, discovering. And we will put in the show notes the link to where to get the book and where to pick up the show. And until we see each other again.
Which I hope it's soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. And that's it for us today. Thank you so much for listening or watching another episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. This is your host, Beate Gillette, and goodbye. Thank you for listening to or watching the show. We are so excited that you're here, and we are very grateful for you. Now it's our turn to ask you for help. Please do share this episode with one other person that needs to hear what we were talking about today. If there's any question you have about business, please do reach out to us and let us know. And don't forget to schedule your complimentary uncovery session at uncoverysession.com, where one of our business growth advisors will help you to figure out what your number 1 business growth blocker is in only 15 minutes. And that's it for us today. Until next time.